Hello, welcome to another edition of Seen Anything Good Lately. I'm Jason Solomons, brilliant to have you with me as ever. Thanks for listening, and as I'm sure you're already doing, recommending us to all your friends. See, these things work both ways. You get loads of recommends from listening to this show, and then you pay it forward. So go on, like, subscribe, rate, recommend, and I promise you we'll all grow together. Right, who's on the show this week, and what are they talking about?
I have watched Johnny English a couple of times.
The last film I saw was Baby Teeth, which is just stunning.
I think whatever they did to get the performances in that film should be bottled and sold.
Because actually, I watched Devine as well.
It's a female filmmaker special. Not intentionally. I don't like to make a big deal of these things, but yes, my guests this week are all women and they're all filmmakers. I think a few years ago we'd have had to point that out and say, hey, aren't we special? Aren't we featuring the women? But now, wonderfully, it's increasingly usual and unremarkable, so we'll just let the talents speak for themselves, and they are Sarah Gavron, director of hot new London movie Rocks, and she's joined by her co-writers and collaborators Theresa Ikoko and Claire Wilson. Plus, documentary maker Rubika Shah, who's made White Riot, a doc about the Rock Against Racism concert in Victoria Park in 1978, when punk met reggae and defeated the fascists. So we'll hear what the Rocks gang are up to and what they're watching, and then what the Riot Girl is into. All after I tell you if I've seen anything good lately. Well, of course I have. You listened last week, right? So you know I was at the Venice Film Festival and I was intrigued to get back and watch the awards ceremony on a live stream from back home. I was delighted to see that Vanessa Kirby won Best Actress, the Volpe Cup. I told you last week that her performance in Pieces of a Woman was a standout and that she was definitely a favourite for the win. And if I didn't tell you that on the podcast, I'm sure I told someone. Maybe it was on Front Row on Radio 4, or maybe it was on Radio London, or maybe it was my mate Nick in the pub. Anyway, I'm claiming it. I'm claiming having called that one, and the film's been picked up by Netflix now, so you'll definitely be seeing that soon. Vanessa Kirby in Pieces of a Woman. And I was delighted to see Pier Francesco Favino win the Volpe Cup for Best Actor. I didn't guess that one, but I did have him on last week's show, so I knew something was up. You know, we intuit these things on Seen Anything Good Lately. And as for Best Film, Nomadland, well, I didn't see that one as it played last in the competition, so forgive me for missing that out of my roundup, but I obviously can't wait to see it. Congrats to that film, to the director Chloe Zhao, whose previous work I've really enjoyed, and to Frances McDormand, who by all accounts is fantastic in that. Of course, she won at Venice for 3 billboards and went all the way on to win an Oscar. That's where that film debuted, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and that was her big Oscar-winning role. So maybe there's another procession from the Lido to the Oscars for Nomadland. So what have I watched? I did catch the first episode of The Singapore Grip on ITV. Can't say I'll be catching many more episodes of that one. I like the idea, and you can see why they commissioned it and where they've gone for it, because it's a bit of a decadent, oriental, colonial glamour with a tropical heat and a bit of looming war. But it's all very by the book. And despite a fine casts, including Charles Dance, Jane Horrocks, Cole Meany, Luke Treadaway, it's all a bit broadly written and performed for my taste. I did watch a bit of the US Open tennis, which is on Amazon Prime now. It's good to see a new face winning a slam in the form of Dominic Thiem, but I watched the first 2 sets of the final, and it's always been very late, the US Open final, even on Amazon Prime. And he was getting murdered by Zverev. He was pummeling him. I mean, there was no way this guy could come back from the pummeling he was taking. So I went to bed 2 sets down, was Thiem, to wake up and found out that he'd fought back. Only the 4th time that's ever happened in the slam final, from 2 sets down to win 3 sets to 2. Remarkable stuff. So well done, Dominic Thiem. I have to say that watching it on Amazon Prime was interesting, because the US Open, for the lack of crowds, it's always a noisy tournament. But what they'd done was they'd put loud music, sort of popular music, like a bit of rap. But I mean, normally I don't mind a bit of music, but it was in between every changeover. So whenever they sit down and sweat themselves up and have a little drink, there was loud music playing in the stadium to kind of force the atmosphere. And as for those virtual crowd Zoom screens, don't get me started on those. What nonsense. I have seen something a lot calmer, which is Max Richter's Sleep, a documentary about the composer's life and career. He did the scores for Mary Queen of Scots and Brad Pitt's Ad Astra recently. He's done Taboo with Tom Hardy on the telly and a Black Mirror episode. But mostly it's about the creation and staging of his monumental composition, the 8.5-hour lullaby Sleep. It's a really gorgeous film, this one, and the music's lovely, and he comes across as a really great chap of sensitivity and intelligence. He's just trying to pursue an artistic career all the while looking after his kids and working with his wife. It's very sweet, but there's something truly epic and transformative at the heart and soul of this film. This is this masterwork, Sleep. I confess, though, I did have the urge to nod off while watching the documentary, which I think is a compliment, although it's just a bit counterintuitive that a film might want to send you to sleep. It does sound gorgeous, and I'm going to be listening to the whole album of Sleep in order to help me get to sleep, because once you've seen anything good lately, it's hard to schluff after that. Okay, let's start this week's guests with a collective for a bit of a change. Director Sarah Gavron is a leading filmmaker in the UK right now, having started with success like Brick Lane and followed it with Suffragette. And now comes Rocks, which is a terrific London film about a girl in Hackney fending for herself and her little brother once her mother leaves, but using the help of her school friends to survive.
Don't get that. Don't get that. Don't get that.
Why?
Don't get that. You're an old woman.
How am I old woman?
Only old people eat that. What, so your mum's actually gone? Again?
It's not a big deal.
So who's gonna be with you guys? Your nan?
My mum's gonna come back. I'm only taking care of Emmanuel for a couple of days.
Is your nan gonna come?
She's in Lagos.
Now, Rocks was all made with a non-professional cast, shot and street cast in East London and workshop there, and it's such a collaborative experience that Sarah Gavron refuses to take all the credit as director and insisted on being joined by her chief co-creators and workshoppers and collaborators in this, the writers Claire Wilson and Theresa Ikoko. So I welcomed them all on the show. The more recommendations, the better, I reckon. And congratulations, everyone, on finally getting it out there. It feels like a long time ago that we first started talking about it. Claire and Sarah, I think it was at the ELFF, we spoke to you. Theresa, you couldn't come. So brilliant that you're back and it's out. What was it like waiting for it? Because you were just about to come out before lockdown. What's the waiting is all sometimes, or sometimes it can be painful, but I think you might be hitting a right sweet spot right now.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the right time. I think I describe it now as like a fire in a barn. I hope that people feel, particularly Black and brown community who have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19 and the injustices that we've seen sort of set the world ablaze this summer. I hope that they feel galvanized and inspired and uplifted through this film, but I also hope it offers a moment of stillness and peace that I'm sure a lot of people are craving, that reconnection. I think because of all of the things that have been going on in the world, to be honest, the wait hasn't been excruciating. Everyone's probably had bigger fish to fry. So just really grateful that we all have made it safely, soundly, and together as a family to the other side.
Yeah, in a way, I feel, because the film is such a sort of family affair. I mean, you guys being the meta family, the guys who made it, but then the guys who are in it, your kind of your crew of actresses and friends. It feels like so close to real life that in the film itself they would have suffered the lockdown, and watching it again, it feels like they're exploding into the freedom of a sort of post-lockdown world anyway. Sarah, so I don't know as director how you would have managed that, but it seems like you did it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we've been having lots of contact with the girls through lockdown. They're so wanting to go to the cinema. They're so wanting to be with their friends and see themselves on the screen. It feels like an important moment to shine a light on young people generally. I feel like they've had such a bad time. They're coming into this really difficult world, and we need to pay attention to them. We need to celebrate them.
Well, everyone's blaming young people, aren't they? They're super spreaders.
Totally.
They're ruining it for all. I don't know what they're ruining for all the old people, but they seem to they're getting a bad rep. Your film, you can't watch your film film and give youngsters a bad rep, Claire.
No, I agree with Sarah. I think that teenagers do get criticised a lot, and they're constantly sort of looked at as what's going on with the world is like they're the example of how it's all gone wrong, and really they're just living in a world that we've all created for them. So they're surviving and they're moving through that.
Going back into it again, how different to your teenage lives, to your teenage era, was this current teenage era that you were mixing with, that you were coaxing out these feelings, this dialogue, this energy from, Theresa?
To be honest, for me, not that different. Like, I'm from the same part of London that most of these girls are from. So I'm from Hackney. The story was written and filmed set in Hackney. So it felt very similar. I went to a girls' school in Hackney. My school friends are still my friends today. So,
and you're telling me that this is not so long ago. I didn't mean to be rude. You're very close to being a teenager, still yourself quite clearly.
But also just, I guess what I'm trying to say is I was surprised by how much these experiences are so shared, because even when we speak, like, you know, as a creative team, we call ourselves like the adults / the aunties of the Rocks family. Even when we speak amongst ourselves, like, so much is repeated in terms of, like, I guess what is fundamentally important, and how important female friendship is and how transformative it is. We've all sort of had that experience.
I suppose that the huge change is social media. I mean, that's kind of what old people are so worried about. So we didn't have that as kids, for sure. We had our own little ways, but these girls have social media. Is that what you're saying, that you were worried perhaps the stories that all they'll do is be on their phone, they won't even know how to engage anymore, and you were pleasantly surprised and relieved to see that isn't the case?
I wasn't necessarily worried that they wouldn't know how to engage, but I guess I was worried that they would miss the light and the joy, because I think we hear so many stories of online bullying, of depression and anxiety, high rates of that in young people, and it exists. Of course, it's really very much there. But what I was relieved about was how much they love one another, how powerful that friendship still is, even though what we see is actually just young people tearing each other down, hurting each other, and just being just so destructive in one another's lives. And actually, they all don't sit around looking for ways to compare themselves to each other or to destroy each other. They actually sit around looking for ways to build each other up and to celebrate and to laugh and to cause mischief in the most innocent and sometimes not so innocent but joyful way.
Claire Wilson, do you think this lot are feminists?
I would say that they are. I don't know if they would identify. I wouldn't want to speak for them.
No, exactly.
I think that they are definitely owning spaces and more confident than, I mean, I'm also a little bit younger than Sarah. I'm sort of the in-betweener. So for me, going back to school, which is what it felt like actually, but going back to school, was what I was just so engaged with how similar it was. It really was like, oh my God, everything's still the same, all those kind of relationships. But I did feel an elevation of voice, which I think I can see in our cast, a confidence about being women.
I felt in your film that they feel that they can do things on their own. They feel they can actually get up and make a difference. And there's a lack of fear, a lack of restraint about that. Not against the system, but on their own. They didn't kind of think, oh, well, I'm a girl, I shouldn't be doing this. It felt to me that they felt emboldened to do whatever it was that they wanted to do to surmount any goal possible. And that felt to me a really empowering message from this film, Claire.
Well, I think that was the atmosphere that we created. And, you know, it was a hugely collaborative process, and it was 75% female crew. And so they were surrounded by women that they could look to and see all these jobs happening around them. And they did rise to the challenge, all of them. But also, I think that they were put in a surrounding where they were able to be as free as they could and be as brave as they wanted to.
One of the things that I love about the film is the look of it, Sarah. But I want to know where you got that look from. I know you work with your camera woman,
Elaine Louvat.
Exactly. So where did you get her? How did you forge that look? Did you say that that's the look I wanted? Because it has a poetic look. There's some gorgeous photography, but there's a sort of a British tradition in there as well of social realism. How did you say, well, that's what social realism looks like today? Because I thought it was great.
Well, we wanted, all of us actually wanted to do a sort of love letter to London, but the real London, not the London you sometimes see, the shiny London you sometimes see on film. And the guiding principle of the cinematography was really the kind of guiding principle of the film, which was let the girls rule their world in a way and own their world, and let's let them own the set. So we didn't want to kind of box them into corners or just create little bits that you know, where they had to walk off the set and suddenly they're in the real world. We wanted to create real environment.
What about the music? Tell me about the music, Theresa. Is that something that you got involved with? It seems very London. It seems very now. That could be Ray Black ringing you up right now. Or did you just listen to what they were listening to at the time?
It was a bit of both, really. So Sarah had asked when she first met me about how important music was. was and reminded me that my answer was everything. So it just really felt like it was important that the film sounded like how it felt.
Yeah, and I think you did, and you got a great mix there. I mean, I think we've talked about how much I love Kokoroko, and they're on there, and Skepta and Little Sims. In a way, when I first saw the film, some of these artists were like bubbling under, whatever, but I think over the last year, or whatever, since the film, they're almost more mainstream now. You're hitting like these big artists, and people are like, how do they get these guys on this on this little indie film? So, you know, absolutely fantastic.
What do you mean little indie film?
Well, it's not it was a little indie film when I first saw it. Now it's the biggest hit of the year. So, yeah, exactly. I'm going to ask you now, because you're on my show, have you seen anything good lately, Sarah Gavron? What have you been watching?
Well, it's always a bit of a tricky question, isn't it? Because
it's not designed to trick you out.
No, I did go to the cinema to see the Christopher Nolan, and that was a good big screen experience. I always watch any film directed by a woman, and I did see the Eliza Hittman, and I thought it was an amazing film.
Because I interviewed her, Eliza, about your film, because I told her Helen you've done it. She goes, "Oh, I haven't seen Rocks. I really want to." So it's good that you've now seen hers, and you can share. Maybe she's caught up with yours.
Maybe she has. Yeah,
I'd like to talk to her. It'd be very awkward,
wouldn't it? Yeah, exactly. But she was watching. I spoke to her in lockdown, and she was watching some Godzilla movies with her tiny young son. So that's what she'd been
I have watched Johnny English a couple of times. Not out of choice, but with my 11-year-old.
Yeah, they do find him funny, I'm afraid. What about you, Claire Wilson? Seen anything good lately?
The last film I saw was Baby Teeth, which is just stunning.
Shannon Murphy, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to work with her later next year, so that's exciting.
Well, as a result of having seen this film, you get a prize. No,
she's actually... Yeah, that's the prize. Yeah, so basically everyone watched it. No, she's going to direct an episode of The Power, which I'm working on.
Do you know what I saw, which you worked on, is Gangs of London, is what you were... I think before I met you earlier, and you were working on this, and I didn't know what it was. Yeah. And I saw that in lockdown and interviewed Gareth Evans, who directed it. That was an event, really?
That was, yeah. I mean, lockdown has been good in some ways. For like the timing of that was just like, I think... It hit a moment, but anyway, we're not talking about that.
No, but I mean, it's different because you've done a different gang. It does strike me that this Rocks, they're a gang of London. They're rather different to the gangs of London in Gangs of London, but they are certainly a gang of London.
I mean, they quite different actually.
They're a group of London.
A group, this we call them a squad. Yeah, a crew of London. Theresa, have you seen anything good lately?
Yes, but the ones I can remember on the spot that I'm going to refer to are Atlantics by Mati Diop.
Yes,
which I was on the panel for the Sutherland Jury Prize for that, and I, as everybody else on the panel, advocated it for it as being something wonderfully beautiful. And also Capernaum, directed by Nadine Labaki, which I just think, similarly to Rocks, just really puts these young people at the heart of it in such a miraculous way that I watched it and I was like, but how did you get him to do that?
And the baby, that's the best baby acting ever.
I'm convinced the baby and the boy lived together for 2 years before that happened, before the film started, because there's no way the baby had to believe that boy was his brother, because otherwise babies can't act. No offense to baby actors.
They can't hear you. They can't fight back. That's what we love about it. You can throw a rattle at you.
Each time you're going to get an email.
You're going to vomit at you, dribble at you.
But yeah, that was, I think, whatever they did to get the performances in that film should be bottled and sold on the black market.
Sarah Gavron, Claire Wilson, Theresa Ikoko, thank you so much for joining me and for your Seen Anything Good Lately suggestions. Do you know what? Seen Anything Good Lately? Yeah, Rocks. That's my answer.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And yes, there is a great soundtrack album of Rocks released on Island Records, featuring Little Sims, Ray Black, Coffee, Stefflon Don, Georgia Smith, Mabel and Celeste, and Kokoroko, who feature on not on the soundtrack, but in the album, on the film itself. They have done a playlist inspired by the film, especially for its release in Everyman Cinemas. So you can seek those out on iTunes and Spotify. And here's Georgia Smith's Blue Lights, sounding a little bit like this.
Don't you run when you hear the sirens coming. When you hear the sirens coming, you better not run, cause the siren's not coming for you. What have you done? You went to school that day. Was a bit late, but it was a Monday. Kept after class for answering back. You apologized, any harm in that? What have you done? There's no need to run.
And that warms us us up nicely for staying on a musical tip for my next guest, and a fascinating subject covered in Rubika Shah's award-winning documentary White Riot, which recreates the atmosphere and the times around the Rock Against Racism concert in Victoria Park in East London in 1978, when The Clash headlined alongside Tom Robinson and Steel Pulse in front of an estimated 100,000 people. I think there were about 3 toilets between them, but that didn't stop them prevailing.
I was asked, would he come down and photograph the punk night? Suddenly, The Clash come on and bang! There was this incredible cultural explosion going on.
It was a scary moment because punk could have gone either way. Some of the bands did have NF following.
The National Front were growing incredibly.
Keep our country free from invasion! They're not English! They don't belong here!
And filmmaker Rubika Shah joins me now. Hi, Rubika. Congratulations on your film White Riot. Congratulations on winning the Grierson Award at the BFI London Film Festival. That's a great start to a film's life, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It is definitely was a big surprise, and very thrilled about that.
Very prestigious. I mean, you're in a long line of great documentary makers, and it's quite unusual, I think, for a music doc to win it. And I suppose that's probably because it's much more than a music doc, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a film about music, punk, politics, civil rights, pop culture, and about, I guess, young people in the late 70s.
Is it something you knew about growing up? It was always something that I was aware of. I'm probably a bit older than you, but I grew up with, NF signs everywhere. And I remember vaguely the Clash happening, and I was too young to go, but I remember Rock Against Racism, and I remember the badges and the Anti-Nazi League. But I didn't really understand it all. Seeing your documentary brings it all back and gives it a much bigger understanding. But I suspect I'm trying to wonder what it is, Rubika, that attracted you to the story.
Well, that's interesting, actually, because I knew a lot about the National Front, and I knew about how dangerous this time was for people of colour especially. And I didn't know about Rock Against Racism. So my background's music, and I've always been really interested in music, and especially archiving music stories. So when I found out about Rock Against Racism, and I watched the concert, actually, that was the first piece of footage that I found in Victoria Park in 1978 that took place, I was just blown away, and I just became a bit of a mad woman and just went on this hunt to find out more and more and dig deeper and deeper into the story about how this concert happened, and about how 100,000 people from all over the UK, young people, marched from Trafalgar Square to Victoria Park in support of Rock Against Racism.
It's an extraordinary story when you then delve into it, and your film does this, about how lo-fi that culture was. Now we have concerts and raves happening, and I guess they happen through WhatsApp and secretly. I don't know if you quite realised how underground all that fanzine culture was, and how hands-on it was.
Absolutely, and it's just so rich. I mean, there's so many different kind of tapestries in that sense. There's, the fanzine, there's the music, there's the personal stories of those that were involved. And we wanted to try and do a kind of tribute to the era in a way. And so we spent a lot of time developing this animation style, which is very lo-fi, and it's actually quite difficult to do because it's 2D animation rather than, 3D kind of animation that we see so much of. So that was really fun, bringing all those elements together.
I think you can know the punk aesthetic from, visually and from fashion and from music. But to actually understand punk itself as a movement, you have to intuit what's going on in 70s Britain. And that's what's important in your film. You really get the social aspect that gave birth to punk.
This is a different side of punk in a sense, because it's a side that breaks out of the usual punk. We think of punk, which is fashion, music, things like spitting, the kind of anarchic ideas around punk, and it actually takes those anarchic ideas further, because it takes them into themes of like civil rights, for example, which is where the idea for the Rock Against Racism came from, when read about a concert in the NME, which Eric Clapton said some quite nasty things about people, and he felt motivated, and I think that's really important, that he felt motivated to go out there and to make a difference and stand up for what he believed in.
It's also that confluence of punk with reggae, which is people forget about how close and synergetic they were, but it was very, very important that they all came together, because it must have been some divisions in punk as well. There was a sort of skinhead racist element, and then there was a skinhead activism element, a civil rights element, and it must have been a very strange and divided Britain at that time.
So a lot of this, the journey of making this film was a journey for me to really fully understand some of the things that went on in the 70s. There's documentaries about it, but I think I was fully immersed in this world of the two different factions. So you've got the punk, which are in line with the reggae artists, and as you said, and then you've got the skinheads that were the ones actually that Rock Against Racism were trying to target. We're trying to say to them, look at the music that you're listening to. Really listen to it. That music comes from Black traditions. It comes from reggae. It comes from blues and R&B, and have a think about what you're standing up for, because this is the brilliant thing about Rock Against Racism. It was able to communicate to young people through their fanzine, through a really contemporary way.
I was amazed looking at your film, what a state Britain was in the mid-70s to late 70s. What a crap hole it was. I don't know if I mean that in the most flattering manner, but my God, it was rubbish.
One of the first cuts, actually, we had the bin bag, and if anyone ever knows anything about late 70s, there's these, I think, was it the Winter of Discontent, when there was, just bin bags piling. I mean, you couldn't really make this stuff up. Like, just the piles in Leicester Square, they're like as high as 2-story buildings, so that gives you a real sense of some of what Britain was like, and the violence, obviously. The
violence and the sort of youth that was going nowhere, and the anger, and of course this horrid kind of sight of these Union Jacks marching down streets, the kind of extraordinary groundswell that this guy Martin Webster from the NF was able to muster, and just the clear anger people had to attach themselves to some cause of any sort.
Yeah, going through that footage, I mean, this is we've cut that footage down for this documentary, which is 80-90 minutes, and having to wade through hours and hours of that kind of racist violence and marching, it does weigh down on you after a while.
I was going to ask, because your film sort of finishes with the great climax of this extraordinary concert, this extraordinary happening. What did it serve? There was a Rock Against Racism concert and the racists were defeated. I mean, it seems a sort of happy narrative. In a way, it was sort of right. In a way, the National Front did go away. They were defeated. What was the sense of the people involved? And I'm talking about, the people from The Clash that you interviewed, to the people who organised R&R. What do they sense of their achievement? Did it take a while for that achievement to permeate through? Is it only in history they can see what they did?
I think it's only in history, because I think at the time they moved on to different causes, also to do with civil rights and race relations. So I think although the National Front had been defeated in the polls, as it were, there was still activism to be done. And Rock Against Racism continued for a good few years. And then I think it morphed into other organisations once that was done. But I think at the time they didn't see it as an achievement. I think they saw the concert as an achievement in the sense of being able to pull that off. Because none of them were promoters. They were just like guys. I think Red was a photographer. A couple of the guys just, they worked in the print shop. They were graphic designers and artists. So to do something as big as that was, I think, quite an achievement, just from a logistical point of view.
Yeah, it certainly was. I love the fact that they didn't have the right sound system, because they were only expecting like 1,000 people, and then 100,000 turned up.
Yeah. And the toilets.
Well, it's still a problem today. Rubika, I'm going to ask you, have you seen anything good lately?
Okay, yes. So I have been watching a lot of films, actually, which is interesting because everyone seems to be watching series at the moment.
You're going back to films, are you? Good for you.
Yeah. So I've been watching a bunch of films. And so I've seen a film called The Orphanage, which really blew me away. The director's name, she did a film called Wolf and Sheep.
Yes.
Does it ring any bells with you?
It does ring a bell. And The Orphanage
is at Cannes.
Yes, it was at Cannes, and I didn't see it. I said it embarrassingly. It's an Indian film, right?
She's Afghani, actually, and so it's got threads of like Indian kind of. It's got threads of Bollywood in it in terms of the way that she tells the story. But what's really interesting about it is that it's set in Afghanistan, but it's set in the 80s during the Russian control of Afghanistan, which for me, I don't really know anything about that, but I'm really fascinated by kind of Russia and, that kind of ex-Soviet kind of the way that, the architecture and, a lot of ideas around that. So, and what I think is also interesting is that it's a different spin on Afghanistan because it's told from this young boy's point of view. And it's really a coming of age story about this, I guess he's a teenager who sells tickets illegally to go to the cinema. And he gets caught and he gets sent to this place that's called the Orphanage, but it's actually more like a boys' boarding school. And it's a unique story. It's a coming of age story, and it's also quite a soft story. It's not about violence and it's not about the usual things that we associate with Afghanistan. So I think it's really worth a watch.
Amazing. No, and that Russian occupation of Afghanistan, that was one of those other things that was thundering on in the news alongside the National Front here in the UK and Rock Against Racism. That the Russian invasion of Afghanistan was something as a kid I was completely occupied by, actually, and rather terrified by. So you're right to be obsessed with it almost at the same time, it seems. It's a good joint obsession to go with.
Because actually I watched Devine as well.
Oh, what a great film Devine is.
So I really feel like I'm quite late to the party with that one because it's so fresh and authentic. And again, it's a coming of age story, but set in, I'm guessing in Paris or another city in France, about this girl and about her kind of coming of age culturally and also wanting to break out of her local community. And she ends up getting involved in drugs and kind of seedier side, and how she survives that whilst also falling in love. And so many different threads.
I mean, it's a great sort of girl friendship movie. It's a great youth movie. It really fun. I think it won a prize at Cannes 4 or 5 years ago. That would have been around the same time as Céline Sciamma's Girlhood was going on. The two are often sort of put together as these great French explorations of subcultures, and I think they're both fantastic to watch, actually.
What else have I been watching? I started watching Ozark.
Oh, you're going Ozark. Okay, so tell me, because people keep saying they come on the show and they say I'm watching Ozark, and I keep thinking, right, I must catch up with this, and I haven't done it yet. I must do.
I'm exactly the same. I think I've watched so many films since lockdown began that I thought, okay, I'll try a series. And a friend of mine who we often like similar things suggested Ozark. So I watched the first 2 episodes and I think it's really good. It reminds me a bit of Breaking Bad in the sense of, do you remember the main character, Walter? He goes through this massive transformation, and I feel like Jason Bateman's character is going to go through some kind of similar transformation.
I think isn't it to do with the sort of drug manufacture or drug dealing in a sort of dark sort of place that you wouldn't expect it?
Exactly, yeah. Because I always feel like if I'm about to watch something on Netflix, it's going to be quite glossy, and this is actually quite indie and feels quite tonally feels fresh. It feels it's good.
Good. I'm going to bookmark Ozark because everyone keeps telling me, and then the right people keep sort of saying that they quite like this one. So it's obviously got the right timbre and the right classiness, Rubika.
Yeah.
So that's a
absolutely
good Netflix
choice. It feels a bit like an indie film, but it's not. Or a bit maybe an indie film meets Sicario or something like that.
Good choices, all of those.
And then I thought about a doc I watched recently that I thought was really great, and I'm interested to hear if you've watched it. It's the Michelle Obama doc.
Oh, Becoming.
Yeah.
No, I haven't watched it yet. I don't know why. I was watching the Michael Jordan one, Last Dance. I will get onto Michelle. I saw some reviews from colleagues, and they were sort of like, it's okay. And I'm thinking it must be amazing, though. It's about Michelle Obama. It must be hugely inspirational. I think she's brilliant. So I don't know why I haven't watched it. Tell me why I should.
I reckon it's definitely should be a watch, because you're right. It's completely inspirational, and it almost feels like it should be compulsory viewing for some people, because her story is just so insightful, and she's one of these people, I think, that she's got so much charisma that she can just carry it off, even if the story is not 100% perfect. I just feel like watching her for 90 minutes isn't really that difficult, because she's got so much to say, and there's not that many people that are doing the kind of work that she's doing. So I think it's a well worth watching.
No,
Yeah,
I know,
so-
I know, and it must be an inspiration too. I mean, I think her book, which I've had a look at, is also pretty inspirational. I just think that she's doing great stuff, and it looks like she's leading the way in like very very inspirational for so many women around the world, and young women, children, I would say even that seem to be flocking to her. I remember when she came to London, and all those school kids not far from where I live, they were all like absolutely buzzing with the fact that Michelle Obama had been in Islington. You could feel the whole borough shaking with sort of genuflecting with glee and about her palpable presence here. So I think that must rub off in becoming and be an inspiration to you as a female filmmaker.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Rubika Shah, thank you so much. Congratulations. And thanks for coming on Seen Anything Good Lately. And I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
And that, from The Clash, brings us to a riotous end for this week's Seen Anything Good Lately, a show bursting with recommendations, social history, music, and female filmmaking talent. If you liked it, let me know by liking, rating, subscribing. Your support is much appreciated and certainly much noted in all of this. We really can see the difference it makes. So be a part of it and email what you've been watching via saggle@jasonsolomons.com. I could do with a new book recommendation at the moment, so it's your turn to inform me. See you next week, Sagglers, and I just know you'll have seen something great by then. Ta-da.